Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of the Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I am Will Doran, WRAL State Government Reporter.
So a busy week, as you put it. The election season is starting to warm up. We had Kamala Harris in Charlotte yesterday, I believe. Our Robert F. Kennedy is Jr. Is coming to Raleigh tonight to do his first appearance here and kick off his signature drive to try to get the signatures he'll need to get on the ballot. And then I got a chance to talk to Pete Buttigieg this week, actually just yesterday, talking to him about he wasn't in town, but he was making appearances virtually to talk up a new program for grants for expanded high speed EV chargers. So a lot of presence by the Biden administration, especially in Durham this week.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's any coincidence that it corresponds with the presidential election year kicking off here. I mean, they're
No,
not here for the campaign. They're here to talk about, official White House business. But, it's clearly a push to, remind North Carolina voters, hey, the Biden administration is doing these things and, just keep them in the news for good reasons.
absolutely, absolutely. And they wanted to make sure that we got coverage of all these events just because of that. In the meantime, things going on at the state level. We learned actually late last Friday, but we did a story on it on Monday that the state rate bureau, which is not to be confused with the state Department of Insurance, they are two different entities. The state rate bureau is proposing a rate hike, a homeowner's rate hike average across the state of 42.2% and as high as 99% out on the coast. I mean, they often come in high and negotiate down, right? But that's about the highest I think I've seen them come in on this.
Yeah, I mean, that is insane to tell people, hey, your insurance rates might double. And, I mean, there's obviously plenty of reasons, for why the insurance rates may be going up, especially on the coast, climate change. We've all seen the videos of, beach houses falling into the surf with the stronger hurricanes that we've had. But I mean, you're right. This is often kind of a game of chicken. I think,
Right. Yeah, they
the
come in.
insurance companies ask for one thing, and then, the state, says, no, we'll give you 2% instead of 99%. And then, they meet somewhere in the middle. I heard Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey talk about this at the council state meeting just a few days ago. He said that they've gotten hundreds, if not thousands, of calls and emails regarding this to his office, and not a single one has been in favor. Surprise, surprise. People aren't
shocked.
begging for their insurance to go up.
Shocked to hear that. But I did talk to the folks over at the Rate Bureau about what was behind this, right? And so apparently there are a couple of factors that are driving this kind of requested increase. One, as you say, is climate change and the increasing severity of storms, and not just at the coast, but inland. If you think about it, a lot of the time when we have hurricane effects, they come inland. So they come all the way up to the mountains in years past, but Raleigh is rarely exempt from the effects, and that's reflected in Wake and Durham counties. Suggested rate hike of 39.2%, I think it was. But the other issue is reinsurance. So as there are bigger and bigger storms everywhere, and insurers don't have the money on hand to pay losses, they go to what's called reinsurance, right? So they have to buy additional insurance on a short-term market. And that has apparently gone up 50% in cost over the last couple of years. So, because it's basically there's more and more insurers dealing with more and more catastrophes, chasing the same pool of money, and so demand's higher, supply's not. So that was one of the they basically what the gentleman at Rate Bureau told me is that you would be looking at somewhere around $400 cost per household just for reinsurance costs that they have to use when there's a disaster.
Wow. Well, that's pretty hefty sum.
Yeah, it is. So I think they're going to be able to make their case to get more than 2% this time. But who knows what it'll be. It is an election year, let's not forget. So that does work in the homeowner's favor, I suspect. Also, this week you covered the latest turn of the screw in one of the many gerrymandering lawsuits.
Yeah, it was in federal court in Raleigh. You're right. There's three gerrymandering lawsuits right now. This was the one that's specifically about the state Senate map. And even more specifically, it's really only about two districts. The northeastern part of the state, kind of just outside of Rocky Mount, from Warren and Halifax counties, going basically all the way out to the Outer Banks and down towards nearly to Jacksonville on the coast.
Right.
So just kind of that northeastern corner of the state. And um, several black voters are suing and saying that, this part of the state is home to, there's 8 majority black counties in that area. And these two districts split them up between the two districts, and in a way that both the districts are only about maybe 30% black, and they're both expected to elect a Republican. They say that that is just clear racial gerrymandering, that, in this black belt part of the state where you have all these majority black counties, you shouldn't be splitting them up to create, two Republican leaning districts. You should basically have one Republican district and one Democratic district. And
Which
so
is the way that it's
they,
been done for decades.
correct. Yeah, this is not a novel legal theory. But they say that essentially you should be able to just swap a couple of counties back and forth between the two districts to fix this. You shouldn't have to touch any of the other 48 of our Senate districts, because if you get into that, it could become a whole huge mess if they're going to have to start redrawing the whole map, put all of the elections on hold for the Senate.
Sure.
That could get pretty messy. And that's exactly what the Republican legislature says would have to happen. They say, no, we can't just swap some land between these two. We'd have to redraw basically everything. The challengers say, no, that's not true. You could just, fix only these two districts without touching anything else. But
They have county groupings for a reason. I mean, that it seems like that would be within the county grouping.
well, that the argument is that it's not within the county grouping, because
Ah,
to do it, basically, you would have to split up Pasquotank County to do it the way that the challengers are asking. You'd have to split Pasquotank in half, which could violate some past state Supreme Court rulings on
oh, geez.
keeping counties whole. It's real complicated.
Yeah, that's like a
But
coral reef of litigation, layers of litigation, state and national.
yeah,
And it seems like you can't turn around in this topic in this state without running into some kind of precedent that's going to get you in trouble for pretty much anything you do.
Yeah, that's the thing with these gerrymandering cases. There's always some sort of precedent that either side can argue, just because we've had them for decades, and there's always been different ways of gerrymandering the maps and different things that were done wrong or done right. So there's always something to point to say, no, that's wrong, or yes, it's right. But I think all of that, even just getting into the weeds on that, is maybe even a step too far, because when I was in court, the judge who was hearing the case, who's James Dever, a former GOP attorney on some gerrymandering cases actually from the 90s, he was real skeptical of these claims and seemed very inclined to rule in favor of the legislature and not allow the black voters to get their way on the map redraw. So I would be surprised if he did order the maps to be redrawn. Of course, if he does order the maps to be redrawn, then we'll have to figure out, okay, is it going to just be these two districts, or could it be the entire state's Senate elections are going to be put on hold, possibly delayed? But it appeared, at least from the way the questioning went, that he was not too interested in doing that. And we'll probably just have the status quo, at least for 2024. All of these lawsuits are, have definitely have the potential, after lengthy trials with expert witnesses and everything, to affect the maps for 2026. It's just looking at this point that 2024 might be too big of an ask for judges to speed them through.
And that is part of the reason they wait till so late in the year to do the redistricting
Exactly.
every time, because it does run out the clock a little bit. Speaking of elections, we had covered in the last couple of weeks that there's been a bunch of different, not a bunch, but several challenges to candidates, which, I mean, this is the time of year when that happens, right at the beginning of the year. And one challenge in particular was this was in Rockingham County, and it was unusual in that it was Joseph Gibson, who was a candidate who was a would-be challenger to Reese Pirtle, who was the current incumbent, the GOP incumbent in that Rockingham County House district. And the head of the county GOP went to the election board and basically said, "We don't think this guy is eligible to vote." Because he had a felony record in Connecticut 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and he's never presented us with evidence that he has paid his due to society and had his rights restored. Very interesting. So the Rockingham County Elections Board basically agreed with her. He appealed it to the State Board of Elections, and the State Board of Elections sent it back to Rockingham with instructions to look a little harder and see if there is proof that this guy has actually, regained his right to vote. They were just about as unanimous about that as the Rockingham County folks were in, denying it or in accepting the challenge in the first place. So that's a very interesting whole case because Gibson kind of maintains that the reason that he's being targeted is not because he's running against an incumbent, but because he's actually against casinos. And of course, Rockingham County would be the site of one of the casinos, and that's something that's been backed, pretty thoroughly by Senate Leader Phil Berger, also of Rockingham County. So interesting backstory there.
Yeah, yeah. Gibson says that, he has been, yeah, I mean, he was on the ballot in 2022 when he said the Republicans didn't fight me then, but all of a sudden I start opposing casinos and they're fighting me now. And he says that he has gotten his voting rights back, that I guess all of his felony convictions are from Connecticut, which he says in Connecticut you sort of automatically get your rights back once you're out of prison. It's not like North Carolina where you have to finish your probation and parole. But the Republicans say he hasn't actually proven that, and that they believe that he may have actually been on probation or parole here recently. So there's just a whole lot of one side saying the other side's wrong. I understand that actually uh, just recently, I think just minutes before we started recording this podcast, the Rockingham County board had ordered that he can be on the ballot.
Really?
Um, Yes, and now the GOP is going to appeal that to the state board. So it's going to come back up to the state board. They're going to get a second crack at it. I don't know yet because, like I said, this is literally just breaking in the last couple of minutes, that the state GOP is working on this appeal. So I don't know when that hearing will be happening, but apparently that is going to be happening. So, keep your eyes tuned to WRAL.com for more details as we figure out what they are.
Right. In the meantime, our colleague Brian Murphy did some great reporting this week on sports betting, the progress they're making toward it. The big betting mega companies are trying to cut deals with sports franchises here, or sports venues here in the state because that's what's required for them in order to be eligible to offer to offer sports betting here. So we still don't have a date for when that's going to start. We do know it's not going to be at the beginning. It's not going to be by the Super Bowl, which I think some lawmakers had wanted, but it looks like it might be by this week by March Madness.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had private industry in charge of this, it would definitely have been up and running in time for the Super Bowl. The government was maybe not quite as motivated to push that through, but I spoke with Governor Cooper about this recently, and he seemed pretty confident that it would be up and running in time for March Madness. That's at least what he hopes happens. Obviously, he's a big UNC basketball fan. Maybe he wants to put $5 on the heels to make a deep run or something. I don't know.
All right. So this week also you covered one of the first committee hearings of the year, not the first, but one of the first, the HOA Reform Committee. And this one came out of, y'all might remember last year we covered a couple of bills that were filed by bipartisan groups of lawmakers trying to crack down a little bit on how HOAs can enforce their rules and under what circumstances they can seek to foreclose on people. And those bills did not get anywhere this year.
That's true. So this is based on just some horror stories that have been reported in the news in the last year or so of, people losing their houses to foreclosure, in cases where the HOA doesn't even have to necessarily give them notice that they're about to take their home away, for things like, an unpaid $20 fine for, uncut grass, that maybe the homeowner didn't even know that they owed, something like that. And, people are losing their houses over this, hundreds of thousands of dollars investment. And so there's just been such an uproar from people. And, those are the extreme examples. There's obviously,
Of course.
other examples of, just people squabbling with their HOAs. I think anyone who's lived in an HOA is familiar with that.
Sure.
But yeah, like
But
you
I
said,
mean,
it's,
sorry, I just to interject, because I did a story about this last year, and I remember at the time the HOAs, their argument was, what is it that we're supposed to use to get people to follow the rules, right? Like what other leverage do we have? And if you take that away from us, are you basically going to, make us declaw us, in a sense, to make us powerless and not able to do what people want us to do?
yeah. Yeah. So, well, and like you mentioned a moment ago, that this kind of all led to this bipartisan push. And their proposal to address that exact same concern was HOAs was basically just to put a limit on it. Say like, HOAs, you can still foreclose on people's houses and take their house, but it has to be the numbers changed over the course of the legislation. It's like it
Sure.
has to be, at least $2,500 in fines, or it has to be at least $1,000 in fines. You can't just take someone's house over $20. Not cutting their grass one time, kind of thing. So they were trying to hit that middle ground, but the HOAs lobbied hard. They were able to kill that bill last year, but uh, it did at least lead to this committee being created to sort of study the issue, come back. They're due in March to file a report to legislative leaders, kind of with new proposals on like, okay, here's how we can, you know, push some reforms that might have a chance of passing. And representatives for the HOAs were at that meeting that I covered. They said that they want to be involved. Of course they do.
Of
There were
course.
also plenty of people who were unhappy with their HOAs who were also at that meeting. So that report, like I said, that's due in March. Short session starts in April. So we could possibly see some more movement there. We'll see. There's plenty on the docket that could be coming up in April, or they could just want to just get out as quickly as possible and go hit the campaign trail. So
Yeah, there are some, I won't say like not necessarily members of leadership involved in that push to sort of regulate HOAs more, but I will say some of the more senior members, especially in the House Republicans, are definitely backing that. So I do think it has legs. I just, as you say, a lot of times what you hear in the short session is that's a long session issue. So we might hear that as another stalling tactic this year, or maybe we won't. I don't know. It'd be a
yeah,
great, yep, be great for after the primary. So so cynical, I know. And so I wanted to mention not a lot going on next week. We know that on Wednesday there's another skeleton session that's at noon in the House and Senate. We've been told that Senator Berger won't even be there, and I don't think the House has anything planned either. So it looks like another quiet week. But the week following that, we start to fire up all those select committees and joint legislative committees on governmental oversight. So we're getting into committee season as we move further into the month.
yeah, which is going to be interesting. It's going to. I mean, ballots are going to start going out for in the mail for the primaries in late January. Early voting starts in February, and but meanwhile, the legislature is planning to start pushing ahead with some of these oversight committees at the same time that all these primaries are heating up. So it's going to be a busy time for everybody in and out of politics.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us this week. We really appreciate you tuning in here on the wrap, and we hope you will join us again next week.